Suicide prevention researcher Jerry Georgiadis is among those advocating for a royal commission. He says the problem is getting worse and should be an election issue.
This is the third time I've been back on your program in the last couple of years. The first time I said 1 in 24 of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander deaths is a suicide registered. The second time it was 1 in 19. It's much worse than that. It's actually, in fact, in my nations, 1 in 10 because of underreporting issues, because of the inability for coronial inquiries to make the determinations in terms of a suicide, what's required in terms of the criteria. It's in fact 1 in 10, 1 in 10 to 1 in 12. The trends are definitely indicating that it's going to get worse, and before we know it, the 5% will be 10%, and the underestimation, which I'm actually arguing 5%, it will be 15%. When we couple that with unnatural deaths, when we couple that with premature deaths, we have a humanitarian crisis.
And I note also we saw this year the very distressing situation whereby a very young person aged 10 took her life in March. I've seen also this week in Western Australia that the state government there is rolling out a new strategy in terms of child protection. How important is that factor when taking into consideration a situation with suicide and self-harm?
To lose a 10-year-old is an abomination. It should be unimaginable. There are no words for the loss. However, I'm aware of year-olds and 9-year-olds that we've lost. We've also lost in the last couple of years not just a 10-year-old, but an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old. I've come out of immunity not long ago where tragically we buried 3 young people, the youngest a 15-year-old girl, in 5 days. In terms of your question about child protection strategies, well, the issues are multifactorial and intertwined. And the reality is that more children are being removed from their families than ever before. They're in an elevated risk group. They're probably the highest risk group. If you're a foster child or you have been removed from your family, you are at a high risk of high-end psychological trauma, that constancy of trauma that becomes multiple and composite trauma and often degenerates into aggressive complex trauma. These children have a higher suicide rate, I believe and I estimate, than even our Kimberley rates, even the demographical rates in this country, which are an abomination of the top end. The Kimberley, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders that I talk about, the Northern Territory and far north Queensland, which is often forgotten but has an equivalent suicide rate to that of the Kimberley.
And Jerry, I note that it's been some 6 months now since a critical response project was unveiled. We're also now 1 week away from the federal poll. Do you feel that there is political and social willingness to proceed with measures such as a Royal Commission with the particular steps that you feel need to be taken?
Well, what we need are the numbers in terms of the political machinery that's actually out there, and a prioritisation of a pressing issue. It should have been on the table during this election, and with a week out from the election effectively, we should put it on the table. This should be the pressing issue.
And that is suicide prevention researcher Jerry